Story 1. The more that is invested in the Internal Revenue Service, the more they recoup because they have the resources to audit wealthy individuals. Cutting their funding is counterproductive unless you happen to be a billionaire who does not want to pay taxes. Story 2. I have read that the Internal Revenue Service has a significant return on investment. If memory serves, every dollar of additional funding to the Internal Revenue Service yields about $7 for the United States, as they are more able to catch particularly wealthy tax evasion. My memory was correct. Some other articles suggest that including future deterrents, funding towards audits on the wealthy may yield up to $12 for every dollar we spend on the agency. This isn't a positive development. Some government reports predict a $500 billion loss in revenue for the upcoming tax season, presumably largely due to wealthy tax cheats. That is a substantial gap in the budget. However, it may assist wealthy individuals in evading their taxes, which seems to have been the underlying goal. Story 3. Here's the reality. They terminate employees and implement flawed artificial intelligence that flags your taxes. Now we, the taxpayers, have to prove the system is wrong. When you call or email, you can't reach anyone because there are hardly any employees available. The government then places a lien on your assets. Now you need a team of lawyers in addition to any accountants to prove you're right. Before anyone comments that this is a dystopian future, we elected a divisive leader as president. Nothing seems unrealistic anymore. Story 4. All I know is that it won't affect my ability to file taxes, as I will continue to pay them. However, it will greatly benefit people who are trying to harm the greater U.S. population. Story 5. The reason the Internal Revenue Service had so many employees was to handle all the cases and enforce regulations on higher income earners. It is a strategy that allows wealthy individuals to evade tax obligations. Story 6. It is a daring decision that could significantly impact both the Internal Revenue Service's efficiency and the employees involved, while also raising concerns about the broader effects on the system. Story 7. Most ultra-wealthy individuals utilize loopholes to navigate the system. They do not do this illegally. Changes to the tax system are necessary to effectively address the ultra-wealthy. Most individuals who face audits are small business owners who incorrectly apply deductions. Story 8. It seems that those with more responsibilities tend to have less time to investigate questionable taxation practices by wealthy individuals, enabling them to take more from the government and, consequently, from lower-income groups. It almost feels as if this was orchestrated intentionally. Story 9. Many people believe that the Internal Revenue Service focuses on auditing wealthy individuals who have their taxes managed by a team of accountants and lawyers. However, they primarily audit middle-class individuals. Story 10. Understaffing the Internal Revenue Service does not mean that individuals are exempt from paying taxes. It results in lower quality service for taxpayers. Story 11. The wealthy will retain their money, while the workforce will focus on the average individual, as it requires more manpower to navigate the complicated tax loopholes and avoidance strategies of the billionaire class. Story 12. This subreddit is starting to feel as if someone is using ChatGPT to rewrite news titles in the form of a question and posting them here. Story 13. Sure. Let's dismiss those who ensure that individuals pay their taxes. It makes a lot of sense if the goal is to increase the deficit. Story 14. I work for the Department of Defense and wish the number would be higher. If people understood what their tax dollars actually support, they wouldn't be burning Tesla vehicles. They would be burning politicians. Story 15. They mentioned adding a number of tax agents a couple of years ago, claiming they were meant only for the wealthy. But around the same time, they implemented a rule requiring the reporting of any transactions over $600. This new regulation seems targeted at ordinary citizens, following the hiring of new Internal Revenue Service agents who were supposed to audit only the affluent. So, it's frustrating. Story 16. They weren't taxing the wealthy, and the newest edition specifically only targeted purchases above $500. The wealthy already have their tax loopholes while the poor and middle class do not. Story 17. The tax system is convoluted. Could you achieve the same amount of work with fewer people if it were just an automated process for most tasks? It's 2025. Come on. Story 18. The Internal Revenue Service rarely goes after wealthy individuals because it is simply too expensive due to the involvement of lawyers. Instead, they focus on shutting down small businesses with fines or targeting individuals who have made mistakes in their tax filings. Ultimately, the Internal Revenue Service has attacked the middle class to collect the most taxes, as the poor and the wealthy often do not pay their fair share. Story 19. The reason the Biden administration hired 20,000 auditors was that the Internal Revenue Service was not auditing high-net-worth individuals because their tax returns are much more complicated than those of ordinary people. This provides a free pass to the wealthy and indicates that everything they have been saying is a lie. Story 20. Anyone who cares about efficiency does not reduce the department that generates government revenue. Mathematics is not difficult. Story 21. That's it? Nobody cared about the 14% reduction during the Obama presidency. All of a sudden, the Internal Revenue Service is extremely important and we need 100,000 employees. Story 22. I want to be optimistic and hope that the cuts were made to eliminate inefficiencies. Why would any president, whether Trump or not, desire to bring less money into the government's coffers? Story 23. It shows just how serious they are about addressing our country's debt, which is not at all. If they really wanted to focus on tackling our debt, their efforts would not be limited to cutting government programs but would also involve maintaining or increasing government income to pay it down. Instead, they are proposing even more tax cuts and slashing the budget of the Internal Revenue Service to make it even more difficult to ensure the wealthy are paying what they owe. It's all about the destruction of the government to protect the wealthy. Not just the top 1%. Only the top 0.01% matter to them. These are the individuals who have absolutely no use for the government and the protections that its regulations have offered to regular people. Story 24. In all my years in the staffing industry, I have often heard claims that immigrants are taking all the jobs. I never truly believed it until now. Story 25. This is one I can actually support if they simplify the tax code. However, I doubt it will be implemented with a viable plan. Story 26. Laying off 18,000 people and they want a raise for it? I remember when we praised presidents for creating jobs, not for creating unemployment. Story 27. It's frustrating. The Internal Revenue Service was already understaffed, and the Republican Party was opposing increased funding, framing it as money for agents to scrutinize your accounts. The reality is that interacting with them is already a time-consuming nightmare because they are spread so thin. I had an issue that is almost resolved, and the correspondence took multiple weeks. Story 28. The Internal Revenue Service earns more money than it costs by recovering taxes, so it makes no sense for it to be cut to save money for efficiency reasons. Story 29. I am not pleased. It was difficult to reach a representative who could resolve an issue before, and it will be worse now. We ordinary citizens still have to file our taxes and make payments. Reduced oversight only benefits those with complicated and questionable tax strategies. I am not surprised. Certain media personalities have been criticizing the Internal Revenue Service for years, preparing their audience for this outcome. Story 30. The Internal Revenue Service braces for a $500 billion drop in revenue as taxpayers skip filings due to cuts at the agency. New hires in taxpayer services and enforcement divisions have been targeted, and the agency has dropped investigations of high-value corporations and taxpayers. Story 31. It is unreasonable, similar to when Republican members complained about the Internal Revenue Service adding positions under President Biden. These employees are necessary to issue refunds, and there have been ongoing backlogs in processing tax returns due to short staffing. Story 32. This is something right-wing parties in Sweden have been doing for years, although much slower and in a lawful manner. They cut the budget, and when people become frustrated that what used to work well is now inadequate, they come up with the brilliant idea to privatize it. Every year, car owners must undergo a car inspection to ensure that everything is in order and that the vehicle does not pose any danger to others on the road. After privatization, 10 years later, inspections have become over twice as expensive, and yet there are still many different companies handling the inspections. Where is the free market will bring prices down argument you always mention? The same thing happened with pharmacies. They were once state-run, but after privatization, there are now pharmacies everywhere, yet they struggle to keep actual medicine in stock. Instead, they offer over-the-counter products and face creams. Did I mention they cannot turn a profit, so the government still pays them to avoid shutting down in areas where people otherwise wouldn't have access to their medication? We still have an employment agency, but it is on track to be privatized. The budget has already been cut, making it nearly impossible to secure an in-person meeting. Instead, you're referred to various private job coaches who get paid by the state to sign you up and then essentially do nothing. Here, take 18 courses on how to write a CV. Story 33. I don't know a single person who supports the Internal Revenue Service, especially after the rule pushed by President Biden requiring individuals to report payments through platforms like Zelle if they exceed $600 in a calendar year. People in this discussion will claim the Internal Revenue Service only targets wealthy individuals, but that is clearly not true. Additionally, when you consider how much more likely they are to audit low-income individuals compared to wealthy individuals, it supports my point. I have strong negative feelings toward the Internal Revenue Service. Story 34. Do you really need to ask this question? It is horrible. This is nothing more than an attempt to prevent tax audits on wealthy individuals. Story 35. Just when the Internal Revenue Service was set to ramp up efforts to crack down on wealthy tax evaders and their certified public accountants. Story 36. The Internal Revenue Service does nothing but save America money. If anyone truly cares about the financial health of America, the Internal Revenue Service is probably the last place you want to make less capable of doing its job. Remember all those trillions of dollars wealthy Americans were hiding in Panama and other locations that have been leaked to the public? Do you want those individuals to pay their fair share, as you do? That is why the Internal Revenue Service exists. Story 37. Republicans have been underfunding the Internal Revenue Service for years. They do not want any increase in the workforce. They only want simple returns audited, not the complex, large avoidance returns. Funds collected will decrease. It's quite straightforward. Story 38. I feel a 15-day account is someone's alternate account or is being farmed, using U.S. political strife to gain easy karma. Story 39. The number is only 20%, which is too low. Many of them have second jobs or go out while working from home. The new IRS agents were created to target middle-class individuals. They cannot go after large companies or corporations that are prepared to hire lawyers to fight back. Story 40. I believe that the wealthy will benefit from the expanded ability to evade taxes without consequences. It is easier to audit those of us with simple tax returns. Story 41. We should pass a law stating that artificial intelligence cannot handle our taxes under any circumstances. Then, when the workforce continues to decline, we can all sigh in relief that taxes in 2025 are now voluntary. Story 42. The Department of Government Efficiency is not coming from a position of good faith. Anything they request should be viewed with extreme skepticism, if not outright denied and blocked at every turn. Story 43. Let's hope the remaining focus is on the large corporations and millionaires to ensure they pay their fair share instead of targeting those in the lower class. However, this country often places blame on the less fortunate, so it seems unlikely. Story 44. Dogecoin is doing all of this, and regular taxpayers will not see any reduction in federal taxes. Even if there is a reduction, the overall economic impact is likely to be significantly negative. This could lead to a substantial shift in party control. The most likely outcome I foresee is a significant tax increase on billionaires and high-income millionaires. A peaceful revolution is on the horizon, responding to the mischief of billionaires. Story 45. If the Internal Revenue Service continues to be fully functional without these jobs, then they were not needed to begin with. Story 46. I'm embarrassed they didn't reduce it more, allowing me to claim I had 9 dependents, lost $3 million in my business, donated $10 million, and so much more. You can't be audited by the Internal Revenue Service if there is no Internal Revenue Service to audit you. I suppose I have to clarify this. Do people really think I would announce committing tax fraud and be serious about it? Story 47. The reality is that for the average taxpayer, The Internal Revenue Service already has your W-2 and knows how much you owe. For high-income taxpayers with more complicated returns, they are using certified public accountants and lawyers to legally minimize taxes. If tax receipts are down, it's because overall taxable income declined during President Biden's last year in office and nothing more. Story 48. It should be noted that Dogecoin itself has no actual authority. All they can do is study and recommend. They are strictly advisors. That being said, their recommendations are usually followed by the actual decision makers, as they often make sense. Story 49. This typically means that the Internal Revenue Service does not have the resources to pursue complex cases involving millionaires and billionaires who do not pay taxes. Instead, they focus their resources on individuals like Joe Plumber, who owes $700 in back taxes. This situation forces him to choose between essentials like food and medicine when the Internal Revenue Service comes calling. It's class warfare. It's time for the lower class to start fighting back. Story 50. The Internal Revenue Service earns $9 for every $1 it spends. It is one of the best investments the country makes and one of the few that needs to be audited by a task force. That shows you that this is not their actual job. Story 51. Didn't they just hire 80,000 new employees? Didn't they say it was to focus on tax loopholes? But the only result has been a record number of audits for the middle class and lower-income individuals. Story 52. They are now receiving back pay and reinstated. I think Dogecoin does not understand how the government operates and is making unwise decisions. Story 53. How do I feel about 18,000 people losing their jobs and the pensions they were planning to rely on in retirement? I feel sad and have empathy. I am also concerned for the economy. That is 18,000 more individuals, likely more due to some having families, who will reduce household spending. This decrease affects corporate sales, which in turn lowers stock prices, creating a cycle that continues. Overall, it is a terrible situation. Story 54. Watchdog Group Open the Books reported that the Internal Revenue Service spent nearly $10 million on weapons, ammunition, and military-style gear since 2020. This amount is part of $35.2 million, adjusted for inflation, spent since 2006, according to the report. Story 55. I would prefer to eliminate Dogecoin entirely and leave audits to qualified professionals who understand what they are reviewing. Story 56. Doge has nothing to do with efficiency. They target the government entities that regulate Elon Musk's and Donald Trump's companies and cryptocurrency scams. If they wanted efficiency, they would hire more Internal Revenue Service employees. For every dollar the Internal Revenue Service costs, it returns $7. For every dollar the Internal Revenue Service spends auditing the top 1%, they return $14. Once you understand that, you understand why billionaires want them gone or dysfunctional. Story 57. After accounting for President Biden increasing the staff by 87,000, we still have a net gain of 69,000 more agents than 5 years ago. This appears to be quite a bit of excess. Additionally, historically, tax collectors have been among the most disliked professions. Story 58. Cutting waste and bloat sounds good on paper, but they are approaching it the wrong way and for the wrong reasons. The real purpose of Dogecoin is to find ways to cover the trillions of dollars in tax cuts Congress just passed. The wealthy are taking from us all. Story 59. I believe all the taxes will be handled this year, even with 20% fewer people. I fully support making the federal government as small as possible. Why can the federal government audit any of us if they choose, yet as citizens we cannot audit them? Story 60. They were already understaffed. They haven't had the resources to pursue the wealthy who exploit the system, so, as with everything in this administration, conditions are just going to deteriorate. Story 61. I left the United States in 2016 when the current administration was elected for the first time. All I feel now is that I hate to say I told you so. Story 62. Oh cool. Let's eliminate the Internal Revenue Service, so we can all enjoy slower refunds and more billionaires avoiding taxes. Genius move, really. Story 63. I might have something positive to say about it if I thought Dogecoin used any type of screening or evaluation instead of just slashing indiscriminately. Story 64. Let's be real. If you want to save money, you shouldn't stop generating income. Cutting the Internal Revenue Service workforce is the dumbest thing you could possibly do if you want to save taxpayers' money. This is absolutely ridiculous. Story 65. You cut the Internal Revenue Service workforce, making it harder for the agency to pursue complex cases involving wealthy individuals and those with significant financial activities. Notice how the organization is only targeting departments that might hinder a billionaire's business ambitions. Come back to me when they start reducing billions from the Department of Defense and military budgets. Story 66. Like Musk and Trump do not want billionaires to pay taxes. This will only exacerbate the debt. Every dollar spent on the IRS brings in 10. Story 67. It's silly. I don't understand how someone can claim they will make up the deficit while reducing their primary income generator. Unless they are deceiving you and it is not really about closing that gap. Are they being dishonest? Are we being misled by Dogecoin? Story 68. Firing employees who ensure the government receives its tax revenue is not a good idea for maintaining a healthy budget. Story 69. Cut more. Dismantle the entire Internal Revenue Service. Implement a flat sales tax on every purchase, excluding certain items such as housing, and abolish all other forms of taxation. Streamline the federal government. Story 70. This will make it easier for wealthy individuals to evade taxes. However, it doesn't matter because the debt ceiling has been lifted for the next 4 years. Trump added 40% to the already staggering deficit in his first term, and he is on track to surpass that in his first year this time. So, who needs taxes when debt will cover all expenses? Story 71. This, apart from everything else they are doing, exposes the lie. The goal is ostensibly to save the government money. The Internal Revenue Service saves the government money. Uncollected taxes are funds that the government could use to pay down debt. If you want to use the household finance analogy, it's like not cashing your refund check while you have a credit card balance. This really exposes Dogecoin as a means to weaken the government and make it less able to enforce the law against wealthy individuals. Cannot pursue what it does not know about. Story 72. It will likely be reversed in lawsuits. Congress has the power of the purse, not a fictional department pretending to report to the president. Story 73. Remember this? This Biden-Harris policy terrified Republicans so much that they went ahead and manipulated the election to reverse it. The agents hired under the previous administration were very successful at identifying wealthy tax evaders. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are wealthy tax evaders. Story 74. It makes no sense. The workload hasn't decreased. Staffing costs compared to Department of Defense costs are minimal. There is no logical reason to do what they are doing unless the goal is to harm the United States. Story 75. Cutting unnecessary excess is essential. Employing someone without experience in government and with a poor track record in the private sector is not the right approach. Musk is negatively impacting America and making Americans less safe. Story 76. He slashed the Biden surge. Taxes nowadays should be done electronically. There is no need for human oversight. Story 77. Just for comparison's sake, the entirety of General Motors employs approximately 92,000 people in the United States. They make everything from cars and trucks to military equipment, along with all the logistics involved in producing millions of goods each year. Why does the Internal Revenue Service have a similar number of employees when they do not produce anything but paperwork? Taxes are an important function of funding a government, but inefficiency is still inefficiency. Story 78. Cutting federal jobs increases stress on unemployment programs and adds competition to the private sector without any justification. It is unreasonable and harmful to society. Story 79. It is unwise for the Internal Revenue Service to cut staffing, as they provide some of the best return on investment. Reducing staffing affects how the United States funds its other programs. This approach seems to favor billionaires in the current administration's version of the nation. Story 80. The individuals in charge want to ensure that the Internal Revenue Service does not have the ability to properly audit wealthy individuals. Story 81. If you are middle class, there is about a 100% chance you will be audited if you can be audited. They have effective software for that. If you are wealthy, you can essentially lie as much as you want on your taxes. Story 82. Musk is exposing wasteful spending. If federal employees are not required in certain positions, they are being removed. Similarly, if someone is hired solely based on skin color or gender without being qualified for the job, they are also being removed or replaced. This is what 77 million Americans voted for Trump to do: cut wasteful government spending. Have you ever driven by a street construction zone and seen one person working while 12 are leaning on a shovel? Those who are not contributing are going. Story 83. Are these questions about government matters posted here to manipulate people through the comment section, gauge public sentiment by the government, or provide a way for individuals to express their anger so they are not emotionally bottled up and tempted to rebel against the administration? Story 84. It is great that we are enhancing government efficiency, but this also allows for widespread tax fraud among those who already do not pay their fair share. This is not the kind of initiative we want from our government. Additionally, we should consider granting broad access to private tax data without ensuring proper safeguards. This could provide the president, who has openly threatened to send citizens to foreign detention camps, with access to personal data on everyone. Story 85. I'm frustrated that I completed my taxes correctly this year. I could have received around $3,000 more on my return if I hadn't included a few items. Story 86. This would be fine if they would automate the entire process. It's ridiculous that I can't file online or digitally without paying a third party. The free tools do not apply for tax returns as complex as mine. As such, I complete them by hand on paper and mail them in. They are all done on fiable PDFs and could be uploaded digitally if such an option existed. Until then, enjoy the 25-page return. Story 87. I believe reducing the Internal Revenue Service in general is a good thing, but to be honest, it sounds too good to be true. Does anyone else have the same opinion? Story 88. Math isn't adding up. Eliminating those in charge of mathematics obviously indicates a focus on profit, doesn't it? Story 89. I believe it is unwise. Sudden changes are rarely beneficial and may lead to unforeseen consequences. Story 90. It is all political grandstanding. The Republican base is slowly declining, so they engage in these activities to rally support. Story 91. I am uncertain about how to express my feelings. It is all infuriating and seems never-ending. I have said this before and I will say it again. As frustrated as I am with Elon Musk or Donald Trump, I am more upset with the 70 million people who thought to themselves, yes, this is what leadership is. This is especially true in my town, where everyone I know who voted for Trump has personal circumstances that would be more challenging under his leadership than under Kamala Harris. I do not understand it. A woman with a mobility scooter voted for Trump. A first-generation Puerto Rican voted for Trump. Even the very overweight individual in my town, who will definitely need all the medical care or help he can get at some point, chose Trump. I am at a loss. Story 92. It is, like most Republican policy, designed to achieve wealth transfer from the middle and working classes to the billionaire elite. Story 93. It is obviously unwise and has no relation to efficiency or cost savings. Reducing revenue by $1,000 to save $100 in expenses is illogical. Story 94. The Internal Revenue Service generates $2 for every $1 in funding. This is an ineffective way for the government to reduce its revenue. Story 95. Ironically, the absolute worst thing you could do to actually lower the United States debt is to not ensure that wealthy individuals are paying their fair share. If the Internal Revenue Service had more authority to enforce tax regulations, not necessarily to raise taxes, but to ensure compliance, the United States government would have significantly more resources to pay down debts, support those in need, or invest in new industries. Story 96. It shows a lack of understanding regarding efficiency and addressing the deficit, as investment in the Internal Revenue Service generally pays for itself. Story 97. Did the Internal Revenue Service have 90,000 employees? It seems like it was a bit large, and if I'm not mistaken, President Biden added a significant number of employees to the Internal Revenue Service recently. Given how much financial transactions are conducted online, I don't think they need almost 100,000 employees to manage taxes. That's a large workforce. If it were a business, it would be one of the largest employers in the United States. Since most financial transactions are handled online, the technology should not be difficult to implement to verify the accuracy of information. If there are any anomalies concerning taxes paid compared to taxes owed, it could trigger an alert for manual examination. The vast majority of individuals would likely not be affected, as every job I've held automatically deducts taxes. The remaining employees would handle the small percentage of anomalies. In reality, the tax system is unnecessarily complicated in the United States, likely to benefit the tax preparation industry. It would not be difficult to create a solution for most non-business owners where the government informs you of what it thinks you owe or deserve as a refund, and you can accept or contest it. If you accept it, there would be no need to file a tax return or anything. If you contest it, it would be similar to the current process of filing a tax return. The issue is that lobbyists profit from this confusion. Story 98. Who is paying the unemployment for all these laid-off workers? It seems unreasonable to fund zero productivity for 18,000 workers for months. I can't think of a bigger waste of money. Story 99. I just wish it meant I no longer had to pay taxes. But no, it will just mean it will take longer for me to get a tax return, if they even still return this money. To be honest, everything is uncertain and I don't know what will happen. Story 100. I am upset. I have had an audit ongoing for 7 years with no resolution, and I do not see it being resolved in the next 4 years without funding. I just want to settle and move on with my life. Story 101. In the name of improving public finances, we will undermine the one institution responsible for generating revenue. Story 102. I don't like it, but it's a long-running joke about the Internal Revenue Service being inefficient, so it's not surprising. Story 103. I do not have personal opinions, but I can provide context. Reducing the Internal Revenue Service workforce by 20% could have significant implications for tax enforcement, customer service, and revenue collection. While some may see it as a cost-saving measure, others might be concerned about decreased efficiency in handling audits, fraud prevention, and taxpayer assistance. The long-term impact would depend on how the remaining workforce adapts and whether technology or process improvements can offset the reduction. Story 104. Good. They can stop recalculating my taxes from years ago and sending me bills for $36. They don't target those who should be targeted. They're just a burden on regular workers. Story 105. It helps those who cheat and makes things worse for people who are compliant. The Internal Revenue Service still owes me thousands from tax year 2021 and has made errors on my 2022 and 2023 returns. My accountant cannot get the Internal Revenue Service to respond because they are already understaffed. Story 106. For my team that helps homeowners and business owners with IRS liens, I dislike it. Our work has become more difficult and response times are becoming excessively long, if we receive a response at all. This is causing some to drop out from our assistance. Even though we understand that homeowners and business owners do not, they are starting to lose belief and trust in us. While my lead has over 20 years of experience in helping others, I now have to come up with creative excuses and reasons for postponing our work or starting over. We often have new agents, which requires us to restart, and sometimes these restarts lead to further delays in responses from the agency. Story 107. I think it is foolish, given that not many years ago, there was a massive backlog that delayed returns for many Americans. Then again, I feel like the other party did not give the issue enough attention either. Story 108. If you receive a W-2 form, the government knows exactly how much you earn. Fewer Internal Revenue Service agents mean less money because the wealthy and corporations self-report, and they are the ones that need to be audited to ensure they are paying their fair share. Agents are invaluable for that reason. That is why the Republican Party fights so hard to eliminate them while making it seem as though those agents are targeting W-2 earners. They are not. The Republican Party is protecting the wealthy and corporations. Story 109. In this world, Nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. So I guess they are working on taxes, but I am still hoping for the Grim Reaper to come in clutch. Story 110. What does it matter how I feel? Witnessing something completely destructive and foolish like this and asking how people feel about it is akin to asking how someone feels about a devastating natural disaster, except this was completely avoidable. Story 111. The Internal Revenue Service already had a backlog of over 110 million returns as of April 2021. With fewer staff to process them, the wait time for tax refunds may increase significantly. Story 112. Funny how every Republican wants Internal Revenue Service agents fired. If they are not criminals cheating on their taxes, what do they have to be afraid of? Story 113. The Inflation Reduction Act has funded a total of 30,000 new Internal Revenue Service staff over a few years, with the first 10,000 focused on human-to-human customer service, creating jobs and helping people. Some of these staff members are intended to audit more complex tax returns of high earners. If Elon Musk and Donald Trump really wanted to prove a point to President Biden, they would not destroy everything as they currently are. They would expand on what he accomplished. If Donald could somehow replace his reckless anger with kindness and channel that energy into constructive efforts, the planet might appreciate it. Instead, this administration has caused frustration due to the overt and intentional challenges they have created for everyone. It deserves a slow clap for the significant issues caused. Story 114. I assume everyone understands that this is to ensure the wealthy are not audited and the middle class does not receive assistance. Story 115. It will make it efficient for the wealthy to avoid paying taxes. Remember, we all pay our taxes. They have a much lower rate and complex tax avoidance schemes. That's why billionaires want less supervision. It helps them but hurts you. Story 116. I do not know the numbers for the United States, but here in France, every tax agent gives back to the country 7 or 8 times what it costs financially. This did not stop our leaders from understaffing this department. Story 117. I personally enjoy the ignorance displayed in the original question almost as much as I marvel at the predictable responses from Walmart shoppers. To think that an informed voting populace is looked down upon by this crowd. Obviously, you have interacted with these departments more than I have. Since you all act as if change will ensure your early demise, let us never change. It is horrible to consider cleaning out closets. Nothing good can possibly come of it, and you might get bitten by a spider. Story 118. Considering they were already understaffed before, many agencies found themselves in a challenging situation. This leads to poorer service for the average American and significant gaps in tax collection from the wealthy, who are often the biggest tax evaders. Consequently, this results in lower income for the country, which has cascading effects. Reducing these positions does not yield savings, as they generate more revenue than their operational costs by effectively performing their duties. Ultimately, these cutbacks are driven by a reluctance to hold wealthy individuals accountable for tax evasion. There is a pervasive notion that paying taxes is akin to being robbed, which distorts the public's perception of tax obligations. People desire to live in a highly developed country but refuse to contribute financially, which is bound to lead to future failure. We know the necessary tax contributions required to maintain fiscal health, yet there is an unwillingness to enforce these payments. While tax breaks can be justified in certain situations, they cannot be indefinite. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.